Hey everyone, here to preview Matchday 22 action for MLS. And we just had last weekend's slate of games, and teams are going to get a week off now ahead of this Saturday's slate after playing about three matches in the past weekend, or past week. And they're going to need it because they're also going to be playing at least two or three games for the most part this coming week, including that midweek slate on July 3rd and 4th for the holiday. So, yeah, I don't expect much rotation because of this normal period of rest between the week, and I expect most teams to go full strength. So yeah, we had 14 games this past weekend, and now we're gonna have another 14 game slate. RSL is the only team on a bye for this weekend, and yeah, just to go over some of those results from this past weekend. I mean, we just had some crazy results. Charlotte finally doing the business on the road instead of at home. They have a 2-0 result against the Union, who just keep falling apart. They can't seem to get results in general, especially at home. And then the Revs, 4 wins in a row now. They upset Cincy, who's red hot, leading the East for the most part. And now they are without another defender in Hagland. He went down, so they lost a lot of offensive pieces where we thought they would be a little bit lower in the standings because of that. And they managed to, replace them and still dominate the East. But now they're losing so many defensive pieces, and it's really costing them. It's really hurting their identity, and it's going to be interesting to see how they try and recover and stay atop the East standings. And then we had Los Angeles Galaxy, for me, probably the most crucial result because they just beat RSL on the road, who were on a 15 match unbeaten streak coming into that game. They're trying to break the record at 19. And yeah, Galaxy get it done 1-0. Gabriel Peck scores late. They did it without Ricky Puig, but for RSL, Cucho Arango went down early after a collision. He came off due to a possible concussion, the protocol, and it was a bit precautionary and stuff. He should be good to go though for the coming game, but yeah, that was a huge miss for them. And yeah, the streak ends, but they're still atop the West with Galaxy and LAFC, so not too much to be worried about there. Just a crazy result. And then, speaking of LAFC, they just do what they do at home, 6-2 against the Earthquakes, who they lost to in the reverse fixture when they played at Levi Stadium, but continuing this dominant form now, and just Earthquakes, there's not much more that needs to be said week after week. They're just in such a bad spot. They finally fired their coach Lucci, so maybe that might fix a little bit, but I just think it's a little too late for them to make a comeback here and push for the playoffs no matter what happens. There's just so many question marks with the goalkeeper and the defense that some of their better offensive players might not be able to make up for. And then, yeah, we also had two hat tricks once again. Cucho for the Crew in a 4-0 win against KC, who's obviously also been really, really bad this year. So that's good for them. They bounce back from that Miami loss and finally play a game at home for like the first time in a month. So they're definitely feeling good about themselves. And then we also had the second hat trick for the Dynamo. Sebastian Ferreira gets one against DC on the road in a match where DC had two red cards. So yeah, Dynamo looking very decent this year. They're kind of just a step away. They really need a DP number 9, but he's answered some of those questions now and trying to make a name for himself in that spot. So good for him. And they're still floating around that middle to bottom playoff spots. So yeah, a lot of crazy results, more hat tricks. The goals just keep on flowing even during this kind of heat wave in the U.S. And yeah, we have another full pack slate here with 14 games, and I'm going to be going every single one of them. And we're actually going to be providing some betting picks here depending on the certain game. I'm only going to have a handful or so since I don't expect much rotation. So these squads, once again, should be full strength. And on the last weekend slate, if you checked out the Twitter at MLS Digest, we went 4-0. So we're really hot right now. We're trying to keep it going. And yeah, I'm going to have some picks there, but I'm going to go over every game, what I expect, what to look out for, and just general headlines. So let's get into those. First match of the slate, and it's a really interesting one between NYCFC and Orlando, 6th versus 10th in the East. NYCFC, I think they're really happy to be back home here. They've been pretty reliant on their home form. Not that their away form has been terrible. They have 10 points out of their 29 on the road, so 19 at home. But they're 6-1-3 at home, and they're on a 3-match losing streak as it stands. One of those being their last home match to the Crew, but they got a red card in that game, and they still kept it really competitive. But their last 2 matches were on the road, and they got shut out in both. One to the Galaxy and the other to Nashville, so especially against Galaxy, just not a good look. And Orlando, on the other hand, they were 5 winless before last week, but they got a huge home win against the Fire, so a little boost for them. And their road form hasn't been terrible, so it's hard to gauge where this one's headed. I think NYCFC's defense and goalkeeping situation is definitely much more reliable. Orlando is obviously missing players out due to the tournaments overseas and such, so it's really hard to gauge. I think Orlando can still make a game out of this. Their attacking pieces, especially Facundo Torres, has definitely been waking up a little bit in the recent weeks. So I think Orlando makes a game out of this, but I think NYCFC just has a little too much for them, especially at home where they definitely have a unique environment playing on this rugged kind of half baseball field. So I'm going to say 2-1 to NYC in what should be not so easy of a win. Second match of the slate, and we already have one of our best bets here. I'm taking Crew money line in a game between the Revs and the Crew. Revs at home here, and like we talked about, the Revs have 4 wins in a row now, a huge win over Cincy in the last outing, and the Crew also got back in form with that 4-0 at KC, and they're in high spirits, but they have to go back on the road here right away basically, but they have the week off, as does everyone. And yeah, it's just a price I can't refuse. I think the Crew are going to be full strength here. They're obviously losing Aiden Morris now, who is officially a Middlesbrough player. He just played his last game in that KC match at home, so farewell to him. They're definitely going to miss him a lot, but they definitely have good enough replacements and squad depth to make up for his absence. He was definitely one of the key cogs in that midfield, but they still have Nagby, they still have other pieces, and once again, they're just such a much better team here. It's hard to refuse a price like this because it doesn't really come often, and it's partially because they're on the road. But yeah, I don't see the Revs causing many problems here. They're still not a reliable offense. They're dead last in their expected goals output. They're second last in expected goals allowed, with Montreal being the only team worse right now. And the recent results aren't going to, phase me too much. These are still 2 different levels of class between these 2 teams, and the Revs are just missing so many pieces just all around the field. Carlos Hill has been really carrying this team. Vrioni got a brace the other game against Cincy to give them that win, so he's definitely in a little bit better form, but I don't see any omissions from the Crew's lineup. And with the full week to prepare, I don't think this, too much traveling is going to get to them too much. And, you could still take their team total over 1.5 basically, which is probably going to be around, minus 120 or something like that, which I wouldn't mind either. But I'm going to take the plus money here because personally, I don't see the Revs troubling them that much on, the defensive end. And if the Crew get 2 here, I think they win anyways. So I'm going to take the plus money here for a team that's definitely a top 3 team in the East, and they're going to look to keep climbing as they finally get to focus on this MLS schedule. Red Bulls hosting DC United in this one. They're sitting pretty in third now after another handy 3-0 win against Toronto. And DC, on the other hand, they're now 8 winless after another loss to Dynamo at home. And Benteke's going to be out for this one of the most important and potent attackers. He got one of those red cards in that last game, so he's out here. And yeah, I just don't see how Red Bulls don't get another simple win here. In the reverse fixture, I think it was like 4-1 on the road at DC. Red Bulls just completely dominated them. And obviously, they're one of the more solid defensive units. They're 6-3-0 at home. And yeah, DC just has so many question marks, especially in the back as well, that it's hard to not see Red Bulls scoring multiple goals here, especially with the rest staying at home. And Forsberg's status is still really in question because he's had that foot injury now. He's missed the past couple games. Maybe this extra rest will help him, make the squad, but we'll see. And I do expect Lewis Morgan actually as well to be back because he was with Scotland for the Euros, but they've been out for some time now, since the past weekend. So he should be really back in the mix here and at least make the bench. So that would be a huge addition, but they've still been kicking it and getting results with Manuel, Van Zier, and everyone else leading the line. So yeah, I just don't see how Red Bulls don't win by multiple goals here. This line has moved so much that I couldn't really include it in my best bets because of the time of the recording, but I see Red Bulls, just handling them once again like they did in that reverse fixture. I'm going to say 3-0 for the Red Bulls. Atlanta hosting Toronto here, and Atlanta coming off that 1-1 result on the road against St. Louis. They've been finding ways to pick up gritty points on the road, but at home it's been a little bit of a head case. They're winless in their last 7 at home. Meanwhile, Toronto winless in their last 6 overall and 4 losses in that span. So 2 really questionable teams here. Hard to tell which way it's going to go. But obviously Toronto missing a couple key pieces all around the field because of Copa America, and Atlanta missing key pieces for other tournaments such as Lobjanidze. He's still gone with Georgia. They actually just qualified for the round of 16 after a shocking win against Portugal. So he's going to stay away from Atlanta for the time being. And Giacomakis obviously gone and might be getting Salish back here, but we'll see about that in the midfield. But the big thing here as well is Almada now, it's been reported, is supposedly being sold to a group that owns a bunch of teams including Lyon and Botafogo in Brazil, and he's supposedly being sold now to Botafogo with the hopes of playing there for a year or two and then moving up, because he's trying to just eventually, I guess, play in Europe. So his transfer status has been up in the air for the past couple windows, and it looks like he's finally going to be going. So he's not going to be playing in this one. All signs point towards that, according to the reports. So that's their star playmaker out, and just missing their core group of guys here, especially in attack. It's hard to tell where this one goes because Toronto is also the 3rd worst defense in the East in terms of the goals they've allowed. So I don't see much production here because Toronto's offense hasn't been great either, if it hasn't been their 2 star players in terms of Bernadeschi and Insigne just creating magic. So I lean a really low scoring game in this one, and neither of these teams are going to be full strength, so either team could steal 3 points, but I think this game just screams 0-0 or 1-1. So I'm going to say a tie here, a really low scoring one. This shouldn't really be too entertaining. Montreal hosting Philly, and Montreal coming off an ugly 4-1 loss to the Rapids, while the Union just picked up their 3rd straight loss, getting shut out at home to Charlotte. Neither team in the best of spirits, but Montreal's home form has been decent. They've been picking up a lot of draws at the very least, but obviously they're sitting 14th, and their defense is the worst, have the worst numbers in terms of expected goals allowed. Union's defense has been really substandard as well, with all the pieces they're missing in midfield and defense, not to even to mention Andre Blake in the net. So it's really hard to tell which way this one's going. I think Montreal is definitely the more healthier squad in recent weeks. They've been getting a couple key players back, but still not, full strength, of course. And the Union, they're just switching, attackers in and out. Baribo came in and did a lot of good things against Cincy, but then they just got shut out at home right after. So they're really inconsistent. The last meeting about a month ago was 2-2 in Philly. And I think both teams can score here just based on how poor and unreliable their defenses have been. But I think Montreal, the home advantage here bumps them a little bit. I think they squeak out a 2-1 win against the Union. Dallas hosting Cincinnati in this one. Dallas sitting in 11th in the West, while Cincy's 2nd in the East. And Dallas was on pace for a 3rd win in a row last week. They were up 2-0 at Sounders, but they let it all slip away somehow, collapsed and lost 3-2 in the final 20 or so minutes. I don't know how that happens, honestly, but regardless, the offense has been looking a little bit better. This defense is 6th worst in terms of expected goals allowed in the league. And on the other hand, Cincinnati, their defensive problems have just been horrible recently. Obviously, they have Miles Robinson gone for USA, and Miazga got injured a couple weeks ago. He's out for the year. But in that last game against the Revs, like we talked about at the beginning of the show, Haglund is now out for the year. He's a really key rotational piece for them. So it's just another hit to this back line that, they've built their identity on. And it's just hard to trust them defensively, and especially on the road here, to get a result. Dallas, like we said, has been really picking it up offensively recently, but I don't want to just trust the total here, which is set at 3.5. So they expect goals here, but I don't want to trust just the total and Dallas completely, because Ferreira got knocked up in that last game against Sounders. So it might be a little bit leaning towards the minor injury side, but I'm gonna think that they opt to go with caution here because he's had a really long history of injuries, and yeah, so it remains to be seen whether he plays. But Moose has obviously been in top form recently, but this offense really without Ferreira really isn't clicking to its fullest potential. So yeah, I mean Dallas has won 4 out of their 5 last home games with a draw in that mix, and then Cincinnati on the other hand, 5 straight wins on the road. They've scored at least 2 in 4 of those. So one of the best road teams here. Dallas's defense is really struggling the whole year, not reliable. Cincinnati's defense now, you just can't rely on it. So I see goals in this one. I would see both scoring. But for the price that Cincy's team total is set at, I think they're going to be full strength here in terms of the attacking side of the lineup. And Acosta and the rest of the boys, like whoever you plug in there, they've just been really, really turning up. Obviously, a disappointing loss to the Revs, but that was partially due to just their defensive struggles. But I think this could be a shootout here. And with Dallas's concern with Ferreira, Cincinnati has a real shot in this one to control the pace a little bit more and put up a couple goals themselves, because whether they've been home or away, they've been keeping, the win streak going, keeping the form going, and it really doesn't matter where they are. So for the price, I really like this. I think if this total gets over, what it is, the main total, then Cincinnati should definitely be contributing 2 goals here. Dynamo hosting Charlotte, and I'm taking the under 2.5 at plus money for my third best bet of the show. Both of these teams are sitting pretty in their respective conferences in terms of the standings, and both these teams are top 10 defenses in terms of expected goals allowed, and they're also bottom 10 in terms of their offensive output and expected goals allowed. Charlotte's the best road defensive teams in terms of that output, and then Houston is a top 2 home defensive team in the West. Charlotte in the East for that stat I just mentioned, and then Houston also as well, a bottom 2 team in terms of their home expected goals output. So all signs are pointing to an under here. I mean, both these teams are really stubborn. They're really set defensively. Houston likes to have the ball a lot more. And Charlotte's just, they know how to lock it down as well on the road. Houston's been getting a lot of crazy results recently in terms of like just goals, like some out of nowhere, honestly, like a lot of 2-2s. They just got that huge win over DC, but like touching on that result, I mean, as well, like they've been playing some pretty poor defensive teams in the process. Like DC is horrible. They got a red card in that game, obviously. They played Portland in the meantime. They played Atlanta. Like these are not teams this year that are really coordinated defensively and someone you could rely on. So I think the recent run of teams they've been playing has really helped them kind of show opposite of what the numbers are showing, and I think they're due for a lot of regression. The heat in Houston this weekend is going to be crazy as well as it has been around the country, and it really has been making a difference in the past slates. There's been goals galore, but with the price I'm getting here, like it's just hard to imagine a lot of offensive output. Houston's still without that DP9, and Carrasquilla gone for Copa America for the time being. Like at some point the tide has to turn here. I think now is the time, especially with the opponent like Charlotte. And Charlotte themselves, I like where they're headed in terms of their, how they're building their offensive lineup and the front 3, but they're missing a couple key players here in midfield. Urso's been out for a couple weeks now, and they've been definitely getting by without him with some good results, but they're also missing Westwood, who's on yellows. So that's another huge miss. So I just think this is one that gets really gritty. Someone maybe finds 3 points, and at worst, this should be a 1-1 game with no one really blowing the doors off the other. So I'm going to take it at this plus money, and I think this is one that that suits to these two teams' identities. Kansas City taking on Austin in this one, and there's just really not much to talk about here. Kansas City still stumbling so much. They're in such a bad spot. Vermees needs to go, and they just picked up another horrible loss, obviously, to the Crew on the road. They've lost 4 of their last 5, and the only win in that process was when they got a red card, or when Sounders got a red card against them, so they were able to squeak by in that one. Austin FC, they were 5 without a win, and then they got a pretty good break on the road against Minnesota. Minnesota got a red card. Austin was able to score, and then they just do what they do and pack it in, defend 11 with 11 men, and just grind it out another result. So they're still 8th in the West. But neither of these defenses are really reliable by the numbers. Kansas City has a couple guys out. Pulido might be coming back in the front of the attack, but really just nothing to like about Kansas City right now. They're aging, and home or away, just the form really doesn't matter. So I think, the last meeting was 3-2 between these two teams about a month ago as well, and this could just be one where it's back and forth again. Kansas City obviously needs a win much more than Austin here, and Austin's might not, mail it in and park the bus against a team like this on the road, even though that's what they're used to on the road. So I'm going to say 2-2 between these two teams. Could be a sneaky shootout since the offenses aren't great, but the defenses are worse. Nashville gets to stay at home once again after beating NYCFC 1-0. They host Miami, who had a break the past weekend, so they're going to be a little bit more rested here. And both these teams missing a lot of key players. Nashville with more Leal Godoy due to Copa America and an injury, and obviously Miami without Messi and the like. So a lot of players missing between these two teams. Miami's obviously had Nashville's number recently with the Champions or the Leagues Cup final the last year, and beating them in Champions Cup this year, and then also in MLS play. So Nashville, though, obviously back-to-back wins now. They've bunkered it down defensively. They won 3 out of their last 5 home games. Miami's won 5 out of their last 6 road games, though. But I think, obviously they've done really well to grind out wins against Union and Crew. Just unbelievable results with the players they're missing. But I think they might stumble here. I think Nashville might just be a little bit more confident and feel like they could take the 3 points here against a weaker Miami side. And I guess I keep saying this about Miami, but I just don't think they're going to pick up maximum points with Messi gone. It's been a really good run of games so far without him, but there's got to be some stumbles in the road, I think. And Nashville at home, they just do what they do best. They lock it down, especially with Zimmerman back now, and I think they grind out another low-scoring win. I'm gonna say actually 2-1 because Miami still has some pretty good replacements up top. They've been finding the net, feeling confident, but I think Nashville still has enough to grind out this win. I'm gonna say 2-1. LAFC taking on the Rapids in this one, 2nd and 4th in the West. 2 of the top 3 expected goal output teams in the entire league. The Rapids have the best output on the road in the entire league. We know how good LAFC is at home. They're just absolutely unbelievable. They've been showing themselves as contenders the whole year for the most part. In the reverse fixture, this was 3-2 to the Rapids. And the Rapids have been in just really, really good form. 3 wins on the bounce. They've held 2 clean sheets in that process, actually, but 4-1 to Montreal over the weekend. LA 6-2 to San Jose. The goals just keep on flowing between Boanga, Bogusz, and now Kai Kamara, who actually just beat Landon Donovan's record for the 2nd most goals in MLS. And yeah, I'm taking the best bet here, 4th of the show, and the only 2 unit here in both the score and over 2.5. I can't believe the price here. I don't know what I'm missing. I don't think I'm missing anything. The only thing I would consider here is whether LAFC is looking ahead to their midweek July 4th game at the Rose Bowl against Galaxy, the El Tráfico. That's going to be the huge event of the week. But I just don't think they're going to over-rotate here or anything along those lines. I mean, they have the whole week off like everyone else. They get to stay home from this past weekend, and they won't have to travel far. Obviously, it's in-state for that matchup with the Galaxy, so there really should be no problems here. And for a top 3 defense now this season in LAFC, they've been missing one of their key defenders in Chanot the past couple of games. He might not go here. And yeah, once again, the Rapids have been in top form. One of their best defenders, Bombito, he's been putting in great shifts for Canada in Copa America so far. And that's a big miss for them. They've been keeping a couple clean sheets in the meantime, but it's been against really, really, average or poor teams. So LAFC, I see no problem with them scoring here. It's really all about the Rapids to me, and I think they really can get it done. I mean, they have just such a good offense. Navarro actually just signed an extension till I think 2027 or 8, and he's been just absolutely on fire since joining the Rapids this year in MLS. Scored in the last game as well, and everything's just clicking here. I don't see any rotation between these squads at all. This should be another shootout. I mean, LAFC is giving up 2 to the Earthquakes, so like, as good as they've been defensively, Colorado has just been that good in attack, and especially on the road, they just still go for it no matter what. And I just don't see how we don't get within close of this, or how this doesn't hit. And for the price, I just can't pass it up, and I'm making it my first 2 unit of the show, or only 2 unit. But yeah, this is my favorite play for sure. Timbers taking on Minnesota in this one. They get to stay at home after a big win against the Whitecaps 2-0, and they're 6th in the West now. I mean, what is this Timbers team? They've held clean sheets in 3 out of the last 5. They've won 4 out of the last 6 games. The other 2 were draws. They're really climbing up these standings, even without Araujo, Crepeau, and Miller. These key people in defense and their goalie, they've just been finding ways to get these results, and their defense has somehow improved, albeit it's been kind of, more suspect teams in the West as well who are struggling, but still they're picking up valuable points. And Minnesota, on the other hand, 3 losses in a row now, without Pookie, without Oluwase, and some other guys just here and there. Dane St. Clair as well at keeper. It's not been going as well as it started. They're still 5th in the West, so still hanging on to something, but definitely without those players, their depth is being tested, and they're really struggling as of late. I think Timbers are definitely in higher spirits now. They get to stay at home, and the attack's been clicking recently with Anthony, with Rodriguez, and all of them. So I think they have enough. They have what it takes here. I don't think they're going to hold another clean sheet, but I do think they have what it takes to scrape out another result here. I'm going to say 2-1 to the Red Hot Timbers. The last best bet of the show here for me is Galaxy team total over 1.5 at a ridiculous price as well for me. I don't get it. They're playing the Earthquakes here. San Jose hosting. These teams have played twice already this season. Once at San Jose, that was 3-1 for the Galaxy. The other one was 4-3 at home for the Galaxy. Galaxy coming off a huge 1-0 win like we talked about at RSL. Their road form has been great as well as of late in terms of getting results at least. And San Jose just giving up goals for fun. Obviously, that 6-2 loss to LAFC. It just really doesn't matter whether they play home or away. This is one of the worst defenses, have one of the worst goalkeeping units in the entire league, and just can't be trusted. Even with Ricky Puig out for the Galaxy, Fagundes has been running the show, pulling the strings, and now Painsel's back on the other wing supporting Peck. So, everyone should be, good to go here. And with the rest and everything, even with that look ahead to the LAFC game, it's just an unbelievable price for me. I will never trust this defense, of course, because the Quakes have scored. They scored 3 against Galaxy, made it tough for them even with a red card in that previous game. And they've scored on Galaxy in both the fixtures this year. So Galaxy have held back-to-back clean sheets somehow. With Neil back, it's definitely been an improvement, but it's just hard to not take this. I mean, the Quakes just fired their coach, so there could be some, juju there in terms of the new coach bump and all that, but I just don't see how it fixes the defensive problems. The Galaxy are just a force to be reckoned with. It's hard to see them being stopped by a team as bad as the Quakes. Galaxy didn't obviously have to travel far for that RSL game, and now they get a week off in state. Then their next game's in state, even though it's not, a home game. And for the price here, I have to ride with this potent offense against a really, really poor defense. So it's pretty straightforward here for me. Really don't know what else to say. Even without Puig, Fagundes has been able to provide the playmaking, and the guys up top are just too good to not take this price up. Sounders hosting the Fire. Sounders obviously with that huge comeback win against Dallas at home, saving themselves from embarrassment. And the Fire, they were looking good without Shaqiri for, about a month. And they were kind of climbing out of the hole they dug themselves early on in, but one lost to Orlando the past game, and now they're dead last in the East. So, yeah, not looking the best for them, and they have a lot to work to do still. Obviously, the point, it's not a big gap, in terms of those bottom 5 teams in the East, but right now they're sitting last, and it's hard to back them here. Seattle really still doesn't move me offensively, especially with their numbers. Their defense has been decent, but it's hard to trust the Fire's defense, especially on the road. The offense has definitely clicked recently. They still scored 2 in that Orlando loss, but it's just super hard to trust the defense. I think both get on the score sheet here, but I think the Fire just have too many road woes. The Sounders seem to be getting De La Vega back for this one, so he might feature, and that'll definitely give them a spark. But it remains to be seen what this full lineup looks like, because Rui Diaz and Nuhu they didn't train upcoming during this week for one of the days because of disciplinary reasons. So it's interesting to see what the Sounders lineups will look like, but I'm going to say Sounders still managed to squeak this one out. Their home form, even though it hasn't been the most electric type of play at home, I still think they get over the hump. The Fire are just too bad on the road. So I say 2-1 to Seattle. Vancouver taking on St. Louis. Whitecaps back at home here, and they're really plummeting in the West standings. Another bad loss, 2 losses in a row now on the road. The most recent one coming to Timbers. And now they take on St. Louis, who is winless in their last 8. So it's really hard to call this one. Both these offenses have been really limited throughout this season. Well, the Whitecaps' floor is super high, but their ceiling is really limited. Gauld has been really carrying the attacking, load, and White has kind of regressed from last season. Meanwhile, St. Louis, even with Lewin back, they are creating decent chances, but the striker options have just really not been there. They seem to just absolutely have no idea what to do once they get into that final third in terms of the creativity. But honestly, I'm leaning towards a higher scoring game here. Neither of these defenses have been great. St. Louis obviously just terrible, and missing a couple pieces here, as they have been for the past couple weeks. But with Vancouver's home boost, I think they can definitely score on the St. Louis defense, and there's something to me tells me that St. Louis is going to get on the board here as well. With the extra rest, it is a long trip, but I see goals in this one for whatever reason, to really out of form teams who really need a result. And I'm going to say neither gets 3 points. I see goals. I'm going to say 2-2 between these two struggling teams in the West. Thanks for tuning in, as always, to the show, guys. If you enjoy the content, please make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. And also follow the Twitter at MLS Digest. I go over any and all MLS news and information. And I also post my other betting picks on there if I have any more additions to the ones that I mentioned in the show, or if I don't post any on the show at all, depending on the week and the congested schedule and all that. I post those on game days. So if you're interested in any of that, please make sure to follow the Twitter. And yeah, once again, thanks for watching, everyone. I hope you enjoy the weekend's games. I wish you the best of luck if you decide to bet, and I'll see you for next week's video.